Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name's Leslie Spiro, and I'm the CEO of Tick42, developers of the Glue42 desktop interop product that we're going to be talking about. I see people still rolling in, and I think I'll give them 30 seconds, and then they can, we'll start on the contents of this webinar. The first bit is a little overview from me, so if people miss that, they won't be missing the most important parts of the conversation. So good, let me start from here. And first of all, let me start by thanking you for taking the time to join us for this webinar, where we're going to introduce you all to Glue42 Core. The main part of the webinar is going to be delivered by Petyo Ivanov, who's the Glue42 product manager. And he will show you, kind of get into some more detail, show you the working apps, talk a lot more about how this is positioned, where it's coming from, particularly talking about desktop PWA and the Glue42 Core project in detail. I'm here to provide some waffle and maybe also just a little bit of context just to talk to you about why Glue42 are doing this and what we think this is. You may have different views, but at least we can say where we were trying to come from. And I assume, first of all, that everyone here is familiar with desktop interop and the use of Electron-based containers to offer users of web applications a desktop window experience. If not, there are a number of companies that provide this kind of thing. Please check out our Glue42 website for some details. But we're assuming that you kind of know what a platform is, what Electron is, and what interop is. But if you don't, it'll be fairly obvious from the presentation, particularly when Petyo gets into the details. So I wanted to just provide a bit of context about what led us to develop and deliver Glue42 Core. And really there were two drivers that we were thinking about as we started to think about this project. The first driver was about installations, which can be a bit disheartening if you come from a developer background. You know, having great functionality in a product is very important. And as the developers of the product, incredibly satisfying. But, you know, as we all really know in our heart of hearts, it's only useful if your clients can deploy this great functionality. And as many of you know, installing a desktop container, which is like an Electron, is a barrier to adoption and deployment. And that can be particularly challenging if you're an application developer and you want to deliver your application to multiple external clients. Each client, each organization has its own installation validation processes. And so it was certainly a barrier for Glue42. And we started thinking about ways we could improve the deployment experience with Glue42 last summer. And we were talking about lots of kind of things you might expect people to talk about. But then it was, I mean, I used the word exciting several times in this thing, but it was genuinely really exciting to discover that Google and Microsoft had been on a similar journey, how they get their apps installed and how to offer a desktop window experience, by which we mean a web application running outside the tab of a browser. And their solution was quite radical, because what they started doing was adding Electron-style functionality into Chromium, which is the Chrome browser and now the Edge browser. This is all part of their PWACE support. And of course, their installation is sorted out because someone has a browser installed, typically Chrome or Edge. And that was their solution to this installation problem for your applications, is don't install the app, just let the browser support it. And Petyo talks a lot more about this in his presentation and maybe give you a much clearer picture than what I've just said. But the first time I saw a web application running in a browser, you press a button and suddenly the browser closes and you get this window application in the taskbar, and it's the same web application outside. That was a real high spot, a bit like the first time I saw a Chromium window running a web application as a desktop application. And that was all done without any installation whatsoever. So that was the first kind of big driver, that suddenly this whole new option for installation had opened up. And then our job was really to look and think, what do we need to add to Glue42 Core to allow web developers to kind of have the same kind of experience that they offer their users through an Electron application. So there's interop and layouts and all that kind of stuff. The second driver for us developing Glue42 Core was thinking about open source I mean, we all know open source is a good thing, right? But turning it into a viable business, which is one of our goals in Glue42, can be quite hard. And Petio had a major input here. He's had experience of helping to grow a business around an open source core. And he was adamant, to the point of hostility almost, that open washing some code that couldn't be used for real work was absolutely, I think he used the word, a lame strategy, and that he would not support it. So I was kind of slightly challenged by that, but in the end, the senior management team, we've just come to support this and absolutely embrace this idea. So Glue42 Core that we're going to show you today is real code. It's fit for production, and it's available to anyone. It's available to anyone to use in any way. You can fork it, and it's also about, we've set it up so that we can accept contributions from other companies and individuals. And we really want to work to build a real community around this code, which we can all then use to move our businesses forward in our various ways. And the second thing we were thinking about open source came out really of our involvement with Finos and the FTC3 project in particular. We've been very involved. And I think that the success of FTC3, we've just recently released the 1.1 standard, has shown how productive open source processes can be in defining open standards. So FTC3 is a set of open standards around interoperance and application directories and contexts and stuff. But I do personally think that the FTC3 project has suffered from not having an open source implementation of these standards, and that has caused problems with lack of demo code that people can run, testing and sample ups. I mean, there are loads of proprietary implementations, but not really any open source one. And Glue42 Core will very soon offer a full open source implementation of FTC3 1.1, which I think will be very useful to the FTC3 community. So in summary, I'm about to hand over to Petio for the real presentation. Glue42 Core represents a zero deployment alternative for many Electron container-based applications. It's a real open source project. It's designed for production, open to contribution from other companies and individuals. And we're also going to be offering open source implementations of some key standards, starting with FTC3. And so let me hand over now to Petio, who will kind of really show the details of what Glue42 Core is. Thank you very much.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the Glue42 Core release webinar. My name is Petyo Ivanov, I'm the product manager of Glue42, and I'm really excited to be with you today. We have some great news to share. Following the latest trends, the audio of my presentation is likely to feature my neighbor's renovation project, my cat, either one or both of my children, and if things get really serious, my wife. Before we start, I would like to mention that throughout the presentation, we will collect questions through the Zoom webinar interface and answer them by the end of it. Go ahead and ask us anything which is left unclear in the slides. Now, our webinar today will start with a crash course in desktop progressive web applications. The concept is relatively new and, for that matter, amazing to see in action. Glue42 Core primary purpose is the integration of desktop PWACE, so we would like to get this out of the way. Once we have it clear, we're going to go over the product itself, its major capabilities and how they work in the browser. Next, we're going to walk you through the example application built with Glue42 Core and show you how those features actually work in practice. Next, we're going to highlight a few of the use cases we had in mind when we developed the platform and explain what are the benefits which Glue42 Core brings in each of them. Afterwards, we will share some highlights of our product roadmap. Finally, we will wrap up with directions on how you can start using Glue42 Core today. Even though the product is in its initial release, we consider it to be fully suitable for production usage. Now, progressive web applications themselves are not exactly new, but desktop progressive web apps are. Now, Google pioneered the concept on the Android platform a few years ago. The easiest way to describe what they are is a set of simple requirements which a web app should implement in order for the browser to consider it a progressive one. Once this is so, the browser will offer the user to install the web app to their device when the app is loaded in the browser, which effectively detaches the application from the browser and relaunches it in a separate native window. In the desktop variant of that experience, which actually became available last summer, the browser creates a shortcut for the application in the user's start menu, or on macOS in the Applications directory. Now, let me show you how this works in practice. In the browser over here, Chromium Edge from Microsoft, I have loaded Google Maps. Now, here in the top address bar, at the right hand side, we have a plus sign. When we click it, the browser presents us with an install prompt asking us if we would like to install Google Maps as an app. Let me do that. Now, a few things just happened on my screen. The browser no longer contains Google Maps, it got detached. Also, an entry was created in a directory called Edge Apps. It's also available if I open Spotlight and search for Google Maps. Now let me relaunch the app again from here. There we go. It looks and feels just like a native app. Now on Windows, the very same experience leaves an entry in the Start menu. If the way Google Maps looks right now reminds you of Electron-based apps like, for example, Slack or Spotify, you are spot on with that. Progressive web apps are actually meant to be a replacement of Electron in its function to wrap web apps as native ones. However, unlike Electrons, PWAs do not bundle the browser runtime with them. They share it with the browser. As soon as the browser itself updates, they get an updated runtime as well, which is actually good news. And I'm going to repeat this once again because it's quite important. Progressive web apps are going to replace Electron in the near future. At least this is what we believe. Now, what does this mean for application integration platforms like Glue42? Well, we think that we will have to reformat those solutions into toolkits which are entirely browser-based and connect progressive web applications. In fact, this is what Glue42 Core is meant to be. Let me give you a more polished definition though. Now, what Glue42 Core is, it's an open source browser-based application integration platform for progressive web applications. And by the way, Glue42 Core name comes from the fact that the product shares its interoperability core with Glue42 Desktop. And yes, this means that Glue42 Core is fully compatible with Glue42 Desktop. Just like its desktop equivalent, Glue42 Core provides visual and logical integration capabilities, but they are implemented in a slightly different manner. The shared interoperability layer of Glue42 Core is packaged as a client-side script, which runs as a background process by the browser itself, a so-called shared web worker. All applications within the domain of the shared worker have access to it, even when they are loaded in different top-level windows. Within the shared worker, Glue42 Core embeds the interoperability layer, which we developed for Glue42 Desktop. Like I mentioned earlier, the two are fully compatible. Now, client-side interop has many benefits. I will highlight my personal favorites one. First of all, there is no round trip through the server, so any action performed is instant. Due to the very same reason, these interoperability actions are quite secure. No data leaves the device. The other thing which is really nice is that if application A interrupts with application B, application A actions are automatically constrained to the identity which application B has already assumed. Next major capability, and again this works both in the browser and when installed as a PWA, is the visual integration capability. Full disclosure, Google Glue42 Desktop is still superior when it comes to advanced features like sticky windows, for example. Glue42 Core currently supports opening, moving, resizing, closing of multiple top-level windows for a given web application. Just like its desktop counterpart, Glue42 Core supports layout persistence, meaning that an application can automatically store its Windows state upon quit and restore it when it gets restarted. Now, there are certain features coming from the Chromium roadmap itself, which will allow us to take the visual integration story further, including proper support for multiple monitors and the option to open web applications in progressive mode, detached from the browser. Taking the story of Glue Core being the web equivalent of Glue42 Desktop, we are also exposing a few other things. For example, Glue42 Core ships an abstraction layer on top of the browser push notification, making it possible for the developer to use the same API regardless of the actual application runtime environment. In addition to the vanilla JavaScript API, Glue42 Core provides a set of idiomatic framework wrappers, making it easy for React and Angular applications to integrate it easier. React bindings are available right from the very start of the product even today, with Angular bindings coming quite soon. Now, let's see how those features actually work together. I'm going to show you around a sample application we built with Glue42 Core. Now, what you're seeing over here looks like a portal interface to a customer management console. At the top there is a list of clients which you interacted with recently. You can also search for one over here, and at the bottom there is a preview of the stocks movement, and on the right hand side a stream of news related to the market. Now, the interesting bit here is that those are in fact standalone applications developed from different engineering teams, which are integrated together within this single window. Since they are Glue42 Core enabled, I can interact, for example, with the stocks app here by clicking on one stock, and then the news app will react accordingly by showing news relevant to the stock in question. This is implemented through contexts. The next thing which we can do here is to see more about an individual customer. Let me click on Christina. Clicking on their card opens a new top-level window, which also integrates a set of applications in a customizable layout. We call this Workspace. Now, Workspaces are a very important feature which is coming soon as a built-in capability in Glue42 Core. For the purposes of this sample application, we are using a popular open source library known as the Golden Layout. What you see over here are more connected applications. Again, I can click on the customer list on the left hand side, and this updates the context of the entire workspace. Another interesting bit here is that the context connectivity is also available across windows. For example, I can detach the portfolio from the main workspace by clicking the eject icon over here. There we go. It's loaded in a new top-level window. Let me snap those quickly side by side so you can see how it works. And when I click on Vivian Heart, the context of this separate top-level window still gets updated accordingly. This is how shared workers are actually working. They can connect multiple top-level windows. Now, this is what I consider a very important capability of Glue42 Core, because you need multiple windows to take advantage of the multi-monitor setup commonly present in the financial services. Now, start of the day is actually one of the use cases we have identified, and for that matter, the closest to what Glue42 Desktop does right now. In fact, in such scenarios, you can use the two solutions side by side. Let me tell you what I mean. Let's assume that you're using Glue42 to run the applications which we just saw within your internal environment. With Glue42 Core, you can re-export them as progressive web application so that users outside of the boundaries of your organization can access them. This also works quite well for people who work remotely, hot topic those days. Unlike the Electron-based application platforms, the setup with progressive web apps needs only a relatively modern browser to be fully functional. You don't care about the specifics of the operating system because progressive web apps don't impose any actual requirements on it. Worth mentioning here is that progressive web apps also have centralized management admin console, which lets you install them across the entire organization. And this works, again, both for Edge and Chrome. This is a very convenient way to instantly deploy your app on the user's desktops if you are distributing it to another enterprise, for example. Speaking of which, Glue42 Core is useful even if you don't have multiple applications, but just a single one. This application can take advantage of the multiple window management, which makes it quite easy for it to occupy multiple screens in the desktops. Another benefit is that if you deploy on-premise, you can make your app scriptable in the client environment by embedding Glue42 Core in it. If the host organization adds the shared worker to their domain, their internal applications can share data and synchronize their state with it quite easily. Now, please notice that implementing the PWA requirements in your web app is a good idea, regardless if the users are going to install it or not. For example, if you spend some time configuring the so-called service worker, and mind that this is different than the shared web worker which we referred to before, it's actually something which takes care of the application being launchable offline. The regular web app will also boot faster in the browser. Next, and this is probably the most interesting scenario which PWAs shoot for, is the migration of Electron-based applications to progressive web apps. If you're using Electron purely for its native windows, then you should consider doing this right now. And gradual migration process with a certain transitional period of running your app in both Electron and as a progressive web app is quite easy to achieve, in fact. Now, if your app, however, is using certain advanced Electron capabilities, like, for example, access to the file system, then make sure that you check the so-called Project Fugu, a Chromium initiative to close the gaps in web's capabilities versus the native platforms. Next thing which I wanted to share with you is a few highlights from our roadmap. Since Glue42 Core is an open source project, we're managing it accordingly through the public issue tracker provided by GitHub. The items which I'm about to share with you are available in the issues section of the GitHub repository, so feel free to like them, comment and subscribe for updates on the ones which you are interested in. Now, the first issue which we are currently working on, and I just love the retro look of the iPad over here, is support for iOS Safari, Android Chrome and macOS Safari. The common thing between those browsers is that they don't support shared web workers, but we know that it's possible to embed the data sharing inside the service worker itself, which they do support. Now, one may argue that no real multitasking productivity work can be done on a mobile device. Apple would like to disagree with you on that because right now they're moving the iPad to being a serious computer. But anyway, however, many of us wish to quickly check something on our phones or even perform simple tasks while on the go. Another interesting use case for mobile is that certain customer-facing offices may choose to have apps deployed on their tablets for convenient, actually, collaboration with customers. And for that purpose, PWAs are just a great choice. And since Glue42 Core is trying to be as closely as possible aligned to PWAs, we will have to make sure that at least we don't break this scenario. Next, and actually not next but in parallel, we are working on bringing an FDC3 compatibility layer on top of the Glue42 Core API. For those of you not familiar with it, FDC3 is an open standard from Finos, the FinTech open source foundation, which Glue42 Core is a member of. Expect some news quite soon here, because most of the work has already been done for Glue42 Desktop. Finally, and this is quite serious, you already got a preview of the feature in the Start of the Day demo app. We would like to bring Workspaces as a built-in feature to Glue42 Core. And I'm saying feature, but Workspaces are actually a set of features, and they include things like, for example, user configurable layouts, integration with app stores or app directories, so on and so on. I'm particularly interested in getting more feedback on those things, so as there is a lot to be done in order for Workspaces to be supported properly. So if you plan on doing something similar to what you saw in the Start of the Day, please ping us in the issue in GitHub. Now, this is the issue in GitHub. The title is Support Shell Application, number is 24. And as you can see here, we have also listed things like channels in there, which are also quite necessary. Now, last item for today, let's show you how you can get started with Glue42 Core right now. Like I mentioned in the beginning, we consider it to be production ready. The project summary and capabilities, the ones which we went over through this webinar, are available on glue42.com/core. From there, you can follow the Get Started link to go through the tutorial, which will show you how you can connect to progressive web apps with Glue42 Core. The whole thing is absolutely free to access. There is no registration required. You don't have to contact our sales if you don't want to. If you do, contact them. They will love to hear more from you. Now, to get in touch with us apart from that, you can visit github.com/glue42/core, where the source code and the issue tracker of the project is available. Now, again, feel free to ask us questions, open issues, file bugs, and so on and so on and so on. This is exactly the purpose why we are developing Glue42 Core in the open. Finally, let's have some space for questions you have asked.
Great, Petio, that was fantastic. I found it interesting and I've seen it before. So we have had questions coming in and I'll ask them. I won't name the questioners because I didn't check whether they wanted anonymity or not, so I should have checked it. But anyway, so let me start off with the first question. I think the questions also go to show that some people have got quite a lot of knowledge about desktop PWA and such like, and I'm sure for other people it's been really an interesting introduction to this whole area. So the first question talks about the case in which a user installs a PWA on a Windows 10 machine. You showed how you can install it from the browser. Maybe this is talking about App Store, maybe not. But if it's installed on Windows 10, will it render using Edge, or will it use the user's default browser, which might be, for example, Chrome or some app that doesn't, or some browser that doesn't support PWA? So yeah, if a user installs a PWA on Windows 10, will it render using Edge, which is the default, which is the install browser, or the user's default browser? Petya.
Cool, great question. So if the installation happens right from the browser, then the progressive web app is actually bound to the browser which it installed. This is actually quite easy to see if you install PWAs side by side through either Chromium Edge or through Google Chrome. And when you launch them, they are, especially on the Mac, it's visible that they are put in different directories and they're run by the respective browser. Now, the second use case, which you mentioned, was that if a progressive web app is installed through the Windows 10 App Store, this bit I just checked really quickly, and it's going to be running in Edge HTML, which is in fact the legacy browser engine. I think that Microsoft is actually going to change this quite soon, given the migration of Chromium Edge itself.
Great. I think it is an evolving space, and I think we need to. You spoke about the PWA roadmap, and I think it's interesting to see how this develops. A second question digs into some of the technology underlying PWAs and asks the question whether the shared web worker, which is a feature of PWAs, is a background service. Does it require all of the windows to be on the same shared origin? And if not, how do you have interop between apps on different domains, and how does that relate to security?
Correct. That's actually a great question. So yes, by default, Glue42 Core is restricted to interoperability within the applications at the same origin. This is how shared workers work. And this is actually a very sane decision from Google, must I say, and from the Chromium, because those shared workers should be secure and they should not exchange information from other domains. Now, we are considering to offer means around that. They are related to several options. You can either do the interoperability using Glue42 Desktop, which is our commercial product. So Glue42 Core eventually will be able to connect to the gateway which is running on the local machine and use this gateway to interop with web applications at another domains, or maybe even with native applications. Now, another option which we consider is the same setup, but going through the so-called cloud-hosted gateway, which is a server-side component. We haven't gone there yet, but if you're interested in this setup, just connect with us and we will discuss it further.
Great, thank you. Another question is regarding support for PWAs, and the questioner asks whether Firefox support PWAs or whether we know whether it's on their roadmap. And you might as well also, for people who don't track these, talk about Safari support as well.
Yes, so PWAs are in the roadmap of Firefox because the underlying technologies are in fact part of the browser standards. So yes, Firefox are considering them. The movement there is quite slow because Firefox doesn't have Google behind its back no longer. PWAs, the installation process itself is not supported in Safari. However, the underlying technologies are there, like service workers, for example. So long story short, going for progressive web apps won't hurt your app performance in those browsers in any way.
Yeah, and I think as more and more vendors, I mean, I'm thinking about Microsoft Office in particular, which is now available as a PWA app. I guess there's more pressure on all of the browser vendors to start to support this stuff. But good, thank you. I've got another one, which is a very specific question. It says, I've got a client currently using a well-known interop package to package and deploy web apps. Can I replace this proprietary package with Glue42 Core? And what would be the benefits if I did that?
Yes, so I would rather generalize this question about any kind of a package which is based on Electron. I think that the main benefit you will get is that your app is now available in the browser and you won't need to install this bundle, which is like produced by the proprietary vendor or by the Electron itself, and which means that you can publish updates just like you would update a regular web application, meaning that they will reach your clients faster. The other thing which I really like is that PWAs, like we said earlier, are bound to the browser, which means that their runtime, unlike Electron, gets automatic updates, and you will be always on the safest and latest security patches in the browser itself. Again, this might have some downsides, but all in all, I consider this to be the better option. And the third most important thing, which is for me the killer feature here, is the absolute cross system compatibility we get, because browsers are everywhere and your app will be functional in the browsers. So yeah.
Yeah, and let me add to your answer, I think also the fact that it's free and the fact that it's this full source code, so you can support yourself as well as vendors such as ourselves who be providing support, I think are important features. So yeah. Somebody's asked about, the question is, can you still dock separate windows together, or is window management now governed by Chrome and Edge? And I think that probably just needs an expansion. So Glue42 has a advanced window management where we have sticky windows, tabs, and stuff like that. Many people may have seen it. But if not, there's quite a lot of sophisticated window management. So the question is, can we support docking and possibly other window management, or is it all governed by Chrome and Edge?
That's also a nice question. Yes, it is governed by Chrome and Edge. The good thing is that more goodies are coming from the Chromium roadmap itself, which will allow us to basically snap windows together. It won't be as great as Glue42 Desktop because it's entirely custom logic there. But I think it will be quite good. So we will be able to support things like docking, etc., etc. But again, we are limited to the browser itself. Don't expect this to be to achieve 100% parity with the advanced window management we have in Glue42 Desktop.
Which, as you said, is still available through our commercial products.
Yeah.
Someone was asking about the fact that, especially working from home, people are using, for example, their iPads as an additional screen. And can you connect a PWA running on a mobile to applications on the desktop via Glue42 Core?
Oh, you mean like across devices somehow?
Yeah, maybe you're
Is
running
this how
Outlook
you...
on your iPad and you can select on Outlook maybe or something else, and can it update stuff running on your laptop? I guess that's certainly a use case I've seen.
Interesting, because I'm using iPad as a second screen, but it's just a feature of the operating system. But anyway, long story short, no, I mean the entire interoperability happens within the browser. So as far as Glue42 Core goals, you won't be able to do that, but through a cloud-hosted component, which again is a different story, which we will look into details later. You will be able to do that. Again, this raises security concerns like identification to this cloud component and so on and so on. But with the current version of Glue42 Core, no, this is not possible.
Well, unless you do contact our salespeople, and then they'll talk to you about Glue42 Desktop, and but it isn't using a commercial product, and then you can absolutely do that. Yeah. What license is Glue42 Core being released with?
I didn't mention this, right? So the license of Glue42 Core is a well-known one. It's called MIT, and it's a fairly standard, very permissive license. In a nutshell, this means that anybody can take Glue42 Core, use it free of charge without any explicit permission on our side, and use it in production again without any need to contact us or pay us anything.
I'm getting asked to finish this off, and so I'm going to go for one more question, which is: will Glue42 Core be contributed to Finos?
That's a great question. Well, it's really up to a future discussion with the Finos team and if they would be interested in this activity. But yeah, that would be a lovely conversation.
Yeah, that was actually my question, and because I'm quite involved with Finos, and I think that's something we will be discussing. So let me wrap it up so we finish on the dot. Thank you very much for your interest. You will be receiving recordings, and we will also collate some of the other questions we've received and add answers to those. So please get in touch with us through GitHub issues, or through our web pages, or through support, or whatever. And we think this could be really important for our community. And so I hope you all play with it and find it useful. So thank you very much for your attention, and goodbye.